saucers and the bodies. Now, what kind of proof do you have that is true? How do you know that?
Well, let me take a look. Let me read to you first what the Air Force says about the bodies. First of all, I'm going to read from the Introductory Space Science, Volume 2, Department of Physics, United States Air Force. This is Chapter 13, Unidentified Flying Objects. Now, this is what the Air Force has the students at the Air Force Academy read. And it says, the most commonly described alien is about 3.5 feet tall, has a round head, arms reaching to or below his knees, and is wearing a silvery spacesuit or coveralls. Other aliens appear to be essentially the same as Earthmen, while still others have particularly wide wrap-around eyes and mouths with very thin lips. And there is a rare group reported to be about 4 feet tall, weight of around 35 pounds, and covered with thick hair for clothing. Members of this last group are described as being extremely strong. Now, I'm not making this up. This is an Air Force. You can pick out an Air Force physics book and read this stuff. And at the end of the chapter, they go on to say, this leads us to believe in the unpleasant possibility of alien visitors to our planet, or at least of alien-controlled UFOs. Now, the picture that we have of the big head that the Air Force describes, this picture was drawn by an Army surgeon. These are one of the bodies that was recovered in the famous Roswell incident of 1947.
Tell us about that.
It was the first flying saucer that crashed and was recovered by the Army. It was covered up. There has been several books about it. They recovered 4 beings, and one of the surgeons that was responsible for the autopsy drew that picture and came up with some of these interesting things in the autopsy. I'll just read a couple. 3.5 to 4.5 feet tall, 2 round eyes without pupils, no earlobes, nose is vague, neck described as being thin, arms is described long and thin, reaching down to the knee section. You can see that there's a webbed portion in the hands, no teeth, no apparent reproductive organs, brain capacity unknown, colorless liquid prevalent in the body without red cells, no lymphocytes. And there's more in that particular report.
This is an autopsy report. Now, you said the government goes to great lengths, the Air Force in particular, to discredit this kind of stuff. Where did this come from? How did you get this?
That came in a private, that came from the private collection of Leonard Stringfield, who was one of the premier researchers. He worked for the Air Force in the early 50s in a secret project reporting UFOs. Then as a civilian, he continued his private research, and this is out of his collection. George, basically what we're dealing with here is, I'll give you the bottom line.
Okay.
I'm not trying to sell it.
I want to hear your thesis.
I'm not trying to sell a book. I'm not trying to promote a lecture. This is based on what I've come across after intense research in the last year. And I have found out that the government has retrieved between 10 and 15 actual flying saucers, 3 of which have been in perfect condition, 1 of which they tried to fly. They have between 30 and 50 alien bodies in cryogenic storage. We even have the name of the person whose job it is to show these bodies to the heads of state and the people who are authorized to see them. They represent at least 5 different civilizations.
I can't.
Let's talk about what the president has actually said. Has he mentioned anything about aliens?
President Reagan?
President Reagan on December 4th, 1985. This is a copy of the speech from the White House just before he went over to Iceland. He says, I couldn't but, one point in our discussions privately with Secretary General Gorbachev, when you stop to think that we're all God's children, wherever we may live in this world, I couldn't help but say to him, just think how easy his task and mine might be in these meetings that we held if suddenly there was a threat to this world from some other species, from another planet outside in the universe. We'd forget all our local differences that we have between our countries, and we would find out once and for all that we really are all human beings here on this earth together.
Now, he couldn't be just making a supposition for purpose of making a point? You're saying he's trying to tell us something?
Well, here, 1 week ago at the 42nd General Assembly in front of the UN, September 21st, he says, in our obsession with the antagonism of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside, universal threat to make us recognize this common bond. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet I ask you, is not an alien force not already among us? Now, this is right out of a White House speech. I'm not making this up.
What did he mean by this alien force? I mean, does it say? Does he go
Yeah.
on to say something?
Yeah, he says, what could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our people than war and the threat of war?
I see.
But the point is, why would he even bring up aliens? I mean, it's pretty far out for the President of the United States to be mentioned threats from outer space.
Okay. What
Perceive at this time as an enemy?
Yes, because when I had the clearances, I had almost all the clearances of what I have, and I had one NSA clearance. And we were aware of radio coming from outer space, radio, and they were very organized. They weren't space noise or disorganized, but we were never able to break the decode them, let's put that. But they were organized.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat.
Is that the purpose of Star Wars? The Star Wars umbrella that we have?
Yes.
Occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. But I've often wondered, what if all of us in the world discovered that we were threatened by a power from outer space, from another planet?